Aerosmith is one of the most commercially successful and well-recognized rock and roll bands in American history. Most people are aware that the band originated on the streets of Boston and have most likely heard of the band's early wild reputation. Maybe not so well known is the tale of how the band was able to finance their breakout single Dream On. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with Steven Tyler, some Boston gangsters, and a suitcase full of money. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. So today we have a story about one of the biggest rock and roll bands in America during the 20th century, but most certainly the most famous to ever come out of the city of Boston. Aerosmith are basically treated like royalty in the city by old school Bostonians. There's even a plaque on the front of the building at 1325 Commonwealth Ave where they lived as a group when they were first getting started in 1970. It's known as the Aerosmith apartment. While many legendary rock bands got their start in Boston or Massachusetts, like the Jay Giles Band, the Cars, the Pixies, and Boston, who were actually from Hyannis on the Cape, rest in peace Bradley Delp, but Aerosmith reigned supreme overall in the Bay State. The band's early, wild, partying bad boy image went hand in hand with the gritty Boston streets of the 1970s. Their lore is deeply intertwined with the culture of Massachusetts during that time period. One particular urban legend that I've heard about the band, which upon further investigation seems to be actually true, is about a mysterious suitcase full of money that lead singer Steven Tyler accidentally stumbled upon one day. Apparently, the fledgling band were all cramped together living in the small apartment on 1325 Commonwealth Ave in Boston. They couldn't afford proper instruments or actual studio time and were kind of stuck playing in the local bar and club scene. The band were beginning to worry if it wasn't going to happen for them until the fateful day that Steven Tyler happened to stumble across a suitcase abandoned on the street. Most likely out of curiosity, he opened it to see what was inside, but the contents changed the trajectory of the band's career. But who did it belong to? So as the legend goes, Steven Tyler had been formulating Aerosmith's hit single Dream On in his head for years. The problem was he lacked the proper instruments to play the song the way he imagined it in his mind. Tyler had his eyes on a particular keyboard that the band could transport from gig to gig, but was also very high quality. Tyler's father was a classically trained pianist, and as a child he would lay beneath the family Steinway for hours, listening to his father play. Even as a small child, Steven Tyler had an astute ear for music. He learned how to read notes at an early age and formed the basic structure for making a song from spending countless hours with his father. Tyler began playing with the idea of Dream On in his head as a teenager, playing the piano in his free time. He referred to it as a little sonnet he began playing for fun one day. He didn't think it would actually turn into a real song, let alone the smash hit it became. The song really is incredible. Not only is it amazing music, but the inspirational message of its song's lyrics is what makes it so powerful. But Dream On almost never became anything beyond just a great idea in Steven Tyler's mind. That's until the fateful day that the Aerosmith frontman stumbled upon a random suitcase in the Boston streets. Now this is where my own curiosity peeks in. If I were to see a suitcase sitting on the street, I'd probably just keep walking by and pay it no mind. Now, was Steven Tyler just in a state of mind where he was looking for a sign from the heavens to save his fledgling music career, and he saw that suitcase as a sign and checked its contents? I really don't know. I, of course, have my own theory. I'm thinking Steven Tyler, as a young struggling musician, was walking in Boston when something caught his eye. In my hypothesis, Tyler sees a guy who has the look of a gangster or someone in that life glance around before leaving a suitcase on the ground and walking away. Back in the day, this was a practice for some dealers or even bookies to leave product or betting slips in certain locations, and then someone else comes and takes it and leaves cash or vice versa. This in their mind cuts out the hand-to-hand aspect of the transaction. The defense is, I'm just picking up this suitcase. I didn't know what was in it. I thought it was legal documents or something. I think most criminals realize that doesn't hold up in court, so it's a less common practice these days. But I feel like Tyler, who was a partier and a dabbler even back then, would have been hip to this type of behavior and activity, and it probably caught his eye. I'm thinking he sees this shady-looking gangster-type guy leave his suitcase on the street, look around before walking off. Tyler probably chilled in the cut for a couple minutes to see if anyone was going to come make a move on it, and then swooped in and scooped it up. He's probably like, if it's a suitcase full of money, great, or a couple keys of grease, either way it's going to be a good time. Now, of course, this is my own theory. Steven Tyler never said this is how it went down. Maybe it's just my creative imagination. Perhaps Tyler was just walking down the street and saw a lone suitcase sitting there and scooped it up. I don't know. I kind of like my version better. Well, either way, he did take the suitcase, and when he got back to the fabled Aerosmith apartment on Comm Ave, opened it up and discovered it contained money, and actually quite a lot of it. So Steven Tyler decided it was probably best if he didn't tell his bandmates/roommates about his transgression. In his mind, they would most likely tell him to get rid of the money and get mad at him. First of all, they probably wouldn't have liked the fact that he took something that wasn't his, but especially if it belonged to some gangster or gangsters. They would most likely come looking for it, and who knows who was looking out the windows and saw Tyler take the suitcase. Just for one reason or another, the possibly more reasonable members of the band wouldn't have thought it was worth it to steal the money. But not Tyler. He wanted that keyboard. So as the legend goes, he took $2,000 out of the cash in the suitcase and bought a brand new RMI keyboard that he had his eyes on the whole time to complete his vision for the song Dream On. Just to put it into perspective, that keyboard at $2,000 would be between $15,000 and $20,000 today. But Tyler got the keyboard and brought it back to 1325 Commonwealth Ave, most likely to the reaction of his bandmates/roommates. Where did you get that? The lead singer was excited by the acquisition of his dream keyboard. He wasn't trying to worry about the possibly dangerous men that had unwillingly financed it. The other members of the band had enough common sense to know that somehow Tyler had done something shady to get this high quality keyboard, and eventually, sooner or later, someone was going to come around looking to talk to him about it. It just so happened that the owners of the suitcase showed up at 1325 Com Ave sooner rather than later. So a really cool thing too that I want to mention that happened in 2012 is I think it was when they actually put the plaque up in front of the building on 1325 Com Ave. It was like they had like a ceremony for it. But either way, Aerosmith played a free concert right there out in front of the building on Com Ave, and like people, I think it was like an impromptu show. I don't think they really announced it till like that day on the radio stations. I just remember I was working some like crappy cooking job in a restaurant, and I was trying to get out of work, and I almost was like quitting my job just to go and do it, but I didn't. But I was kind of bummed out that I couldn't go and watch it, because I went to school at Bay State College for a couple of semesters, like right down the street on Com Ave. Com Ave is such a cool little area. They got that little like boulevard thing with the trees in the front. But yeah, that was really cool, and that was just like a cool moment for like Boston, Aerosmith, and that's what I'm saying. They're like legends in the Bay State and in Boston. They do give back, and they show like their appreciation for like the city, you know. So one fateful day, a couple gangsters showed up at the Aerosmith apartment. Probably some local freelance guys trafficking or something of the like. I don't think it was anybody connected with the Angelos or Winter Hill, but you never know. Back then, guys with the Patriarca family couldn't deal. Plus, if it were guys connected to either one of those outfits, I don't think it would have ended the same way for Tyler or the Aerosmith guys. Like I said, it was probably some independent freelancer, low-level hoods in the city. Either way, a couple thugs showed up at the apartment and walked in forcefully. Probably already having been informed that Tyler was the one who took the suitcase, they zeroed in right on him. It's the extra weird-looking hippie freak with the abnormally large mouth. Yeah, he's the one who took it. Now, this wasn't just some crazy fever dream that Steven Tyler had and talked about in some random interview. The story is actually corroborated by the band's legendary guitarist Joe Perry in his own book, Rocks. Perry claims that he was ignorant to the actual origins of the money that purchased the fancy keyboard, but he assumed it was probably not good. Perry claims the real owners of the suitcase burst into the apartment at 1325 Com Ave. One gangster went right after Tyler while the other held down the rest of the guys in the room. The wise guy took a piece out and shoved it in Tyler's face and said, "Give us our effing money!" The lead singer amazingly played it completely cool and said, "Hey man, I didn't find any money. All I have is dirty clothes in that suitcase." This apparently and not shockingly just pissed the mobster off more as he responded, "Look, you hippie a-hole, lying is as good as dying," as he proceeded to cock back the hammer and continued, "I'd just as soon kill you as look at you. Keep lying and you're dead." The rest of the guys in the band swallowed hard as the room got tenser. Tyler doubled down, insisting that he was innocent and he didn't have their money. The gangsters were getting visibly frustrated. They wanted their money and someone was about to get hurt. Right at that very moment, the band's building manager, or super as they were called, heard the commotion from the hallway and ran up to his apartment to retrieve a weapon. Gary Kabosi, a tough Vietnam veteran who was also kind of a nut but in a good way, bust through the band's door wielding a large samurai sword right as the angry gangsters were about to exact revenge on the harmless musicians who they thought had stolen their ill-gotten gains. Kabosi caught the men off guard using the element of surprise, and the adrenaline surging through his body, he frightened the gangsters enough to make them lose their nerve and retreat. The harmless hippie freaks who stole their money were easy prey to the gangsters, but a muscular Vietnam vet charging through the door, strapped with a katana, screaming like a banshee, that was another thing. They weren't trying to mess around with that. The med fled the scene and crazily enough did not come back. Perry and Tyler both credited their super and Vietnam veteran Gary Kaposi with saving them that day. Who knows how it would have ended if he had not crashed the party. Now, whether the gangsters were shook of the super or they actually believed Steven Tyler's acting job, they didn't come back to the apartment and they left the band alone. Aerosmith would go on to record Dream On, Steven Tyler's opus that had been constructing for years in his brain in the fall of 1972, and it was on their debut album that was released in January of 1973. The album initially was kind of a dud, not making much of an impression on music fans. Then the summer of 1973, they released Dream On as a single to radio stations. Finally, the band got some attention. The song initially peaked nationally at number 59 on Billboard's Hot 100. Not an insane number, but in Boston, the song was a huge hit. Aerosmith became one of the hottest local bands, drawing huge rowdy crowds at local bars and clubs. They were on their way to becoming Massachusetts legends. Dream On was one of the most played rock records on Boston radio in 1973. Then it was reissued nationally a few years later. The song exploded, climbing all the way up to number 6 on Billboard's Hot 100 in 1976. Aerosmith would get national attention and fame from Tyler's masterpiece Dream On, but the band's constant partying and narcotics use stalled their upward trajectory in the late 70s and early 80s. This was a time when the band as a whole and individually went through a bit of a dark time. It looked unfortunately if the band's early success might have been a climax of their career. It was during this time period in the 1980s that the band played a legendary show at Lynn Mass's Manning Bowl where the city's different football teams played. Someone left a comment about this show in a totally unrelated video I made last year about different crews in Lynn. It was a completely random piece of nostalgia that video brought up in the guy's mind. I love that stuff, that's why I truly enjoy going through the comment section and reading them. I guess the show reflected the dark stage the band itself was going through. It was loaded with addicts and people were using all over the place in the porta potties, etc. The HAMC, who was a force on the North Shore, ran security and it got ugly in some instances. The guy who left the comment said he was 15 years old when he attended the concert, and his friend's mom dropped them off in her big station wagon, and that's what awaited them. A bunch of tweakers, outlaw bikers, and a seemingly washed-up version of Aerosmith. Amazingly enough, there's footage on YouTube that I found of this concert. It's terrible, terrible quality, but it does exist. Aerosmith bounced back from their early pitfalls, and the second half of the 80s came back with a force. Permanent Vacation with hits like Dude Looks Like a Lady, and then their huge crossover record with Run DMC Walk This Way catapulted the band into the new era of MTV. Then in the 1990s with huge commercial successes like Living on the Edge, Amazing, and Crying, which is a teenage boy and Alicia Silverstone starring in the videos I will be forever grateful for. Then continuing on with the power ballad model that seemingly couldn't lose, the epic single I Don't Want to Miss a Thing from the Armageddon soundtrack cemented Aerosmith's place as one of the most commercially successful rock bands while also having some most longevity in contemporary American pop culture. That's nationally and really to a certain extent worldwide, but as far as Boston and Massachusetts as a whole goes, Aerosmith are legends. They're the biggest rock and roll band to ever come out of Boston or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but beyond that, they embodied a certain spirit and energy that was uniquely Boston during the 1970s and 80s. Their wild, party, and rock and roll style fit right in with the gritty, rough streets of pre-gentrification Boston. Even though Steven Tyler now looks more like someone's great aunt that drives a Subaru station wagon and listens to Katie Lang, back in the day they were the bad boys of the city. Legends of the Bay State, rock royalty of Boston, but just know none of it would have been possible without the keyboard Steven Tyler bought with the contents of that gangster's suitcase. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Had a tough time recording. I've been like wicked sick, so if you hear it in my voice a little bit, I've been fighting a cold all week. I haven't seen my kids in a couple of days, so I've been sitting here lonely with just my cat. I should have probably waited a couple of days to record it so my voice sounded better, but I was like going out of my mind, especially after that fight last night at Netflix. Let's not even talk about it. But I know I'm kind of cracking jokes on Steven Tyler here, but I'm just joking. The guy's a legend. Like, he's a hero in Boston, you know, and like, what a G. Like, honestly, he's just like this hippie musician kind of, you know, pacifist guy, and he takes these gangsters' money, first of all, which is kind of like a fearless kind of, not the brightest thing, but it's pretty fearless, and then they come and they like demand the money back, and everybody else is scared to death, and he's just like sitting there right in their face, like, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't have it, there's dirty clothes in there. So you gotta get respect for that. The guy's got some cojones, you know what I mean? But if you like this video, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Most of all, guys, make good choices, make good decisions, take good care of yourselves, your family, your friends, your fellow human beings. Try to have a nice day. I'll talk to you guys soon. God bless.